Okay, y'all, I'm just going to keep going, and I hope this tape holds out. All right, so we were talking about the King James Version, 1611. I know some people will have something to say about this, and I'm going to tell you what I know. And we can talk about it. We don't have to argue. We can have a good debate if you want to. But I'm going to tell you what I know. The King James Version, or the Authorized Version, was called Authorized because King James authorized it in 1611. The translation generally used by English-speaking people for over 300 years, made by 47 scholars under the authorization of King James I of England. The Bishop's Bible was the basis of this version, but the Hebrew and Greek texts were studied and other English translations consulted in order to obtain the best rendering. So this is one of the best renderings so far, right? The Bishop's Bible goes back to, okay? It skips the Douay. All right, then, that's 1611. Then 1881, the Revised Version, made by a group of English and American scholars. It can be seen by glancing at the drawing that I just showed you. One distinct advantage over... Oh, it has a distinct advantage over all its predecessors. It reaches down to the most ancient copies of the original scriptures. Here's the tough thing for you to know if you're a King James only. The King James only did not reach down to the original scriptures, whereas the Revised Version, 200 years later, did. Some of these ancient texts were not available at the time of the King James Version. But 200 years later, those original copies, not original manuscripts, original copies, ancient copies, were consulted because they were available. But it's not like it said, oh, they got it wrong. It's that they got it more detailed. They got it more confirmed, so it matters. Okay, so the English version since 1900. The Revised Standard Version in hold on. At least 10 modern English translations of the Bible have appeared since 1901. And as we know, even more than that. Now, the 20th century has numerous archaeological discoveries in the Holy Land, as well as discoveries of the 1947 Dead Sea Scrolls, which included ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek manuscripts and fragments. Some of these are more than 1,000 years older than previously known Old Testament manuscripts, so Bible scholars are therefore able to study and compare with better materials in trying to determine exactly what the inspired writers wrote. In addition to going back to the ancient copies of the original scriptures, the Dead Sea Scrolls, modern translators for the most part have followed the text arrangement of the King James Version and the English Revised Version and the American Standard Version. Now, those are the ones I'm fixing to talk about. The King James, the Revised King James, and the American Standard basically had the commitment to go English, to make it in the language of the common people, to use the best copies they had, to use the best translators of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and as this time went on, they got better at doing it. Did they change the meaning? No, they just got better at clarifying, and there's a difference in clarifying and totally changing the meaning of something. So, does that mean that King James is wrong? No, it just means if you go to more recent versions, you probably have a more clarified version of what was originally available. The Revised Standard Version of 1952, in 1928, the copyright version of the American Standard Version was acquired by the International Council of Religious Education, who authorized a revision by a committee of 32 Bible scholars. The New Testament was published in 1946, the Complete Bible in 1952, and is now owned by the Division of Education of the National Council of the Churches of Christ in the United States of America. The Revised Standard Version is a continuing body which is both ecumenical and international, with active Protestant and Catholic members from Great Britain, Canada, and the United States. Additional revisions were made in the New Testament in 1971. So, we're going to skip through 3 other ones. There's the Berkeley version of 1959. It was translated from the Greek by Garrett Verkruel in 1945. A staff of 20 translators, including professors from various Christian colleges and seminaries, worked on it. under his direction. And they also added footnotes for difficult passages. The Amplified Bible of 1965. This, when I got born again, I got an Amplified Bible, Book of John. And I have to tell you, you have to learn to read it in a certain way. It's the modern English version commissioned by Lockman Foundation, an editorial committee of Hebrew and Greek scholars gave particular attention to the original language. And in additional footnotes, it is bracketed explanatory words for many difficult phrases. For example, if I said, and he believed, in the bracket it would say, and it takes a little longer to read it because of it, but it really clarifies it. That's why it's amplified. It's like bigger. It helps you understand it better. If it says he believed, it would say he had faith, adhered to, relied upon, trusted in, and it defines what that word faith meant. So it helped you really get what they were trying to say. So it was helpful, but it was hard. It took longer to read stuff, but you got it better when you're finished. So that was the Amplified Bible. And that was in 1965. The Jerusalem Bible of 1966, the Roman Catholic work was produced. This Roman Catholic work was produced originally in French at the Dominican Bible School in Jerusalem. The English version was translated from the original Hebrew and Greek text, but follows French version. In most matters of interpretation, the divine name Yahweh is used, and the Apocrypha is included in this Roman Catholic version. Personally, this is just Beth Buchanan. Personally, I would not agree with that. I would say that if it had already been determined that the Apocrypha, while not in conflict, was not adding anything to be considered part of the canon, both because of its inferior quality and the feeling that it was not truly inspired by God versus written by men who were inspired but not inspired by God, meaning God inspired it to the level that when man penned it, it was God's words. It wasn't man's interpretation at all. So there's the difference. Each person has to decide how they feel about the Apocrypha. I'm not against it, I'm just not for it. The New English Bible in 1970, so that's in my lifetime for sure, a joint committee of Bible scholars from denominations in England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, assisted by the university presses of Oxford and Cambridge, worked some 22 years making this translation from Hebrew and Greek texts. Again, this is the New English Bible of 1970. The New Testament was published in 1961 with full Bible editions, including the Apocrypha. It's printed in single column format, and the verses with verse numbers on the outside margins of the pages. Then you have the New American Standard Bible of 1971. This was a revision of the American Standard Bible. Okay, so remember back when we did King James, the Revised Version, and the American Standard Version? That was in 1900. This one, the New American Standard Version, was a revision of that. So there's been some things since then. It was like the Amplified Bible, commissioned by the Lockman Foundation, a group of Bible scholars who worked for 10 years translating the best original texts and endeavoring to render the grammar and the terminology of the American Standard Version a more contemporary English, and the New Testament was published in 1963. The Living Bible in 1971 was a paraphrase by Kenneth Taylor. It was to express in the simplest modern English what the writers of the scriptures meant. It was a pure paraphrase. Paraphrase meaning he read it and reworded it. Did not lose the meaning, but not word for word translation. So I use that sometimes as a study help, just like I do the Message, but not as a research Bible assist. So today's English version, or the Good News Bible, I remember when I was growing up in 1976, it was called The Good News for Modern Man. It was published by the American Bible Society, a translation committee of Bible scholars who appointed to work by the United Bible Societies to make a similar translation of the Old Testament. Their objective was to provide faithful translation in a natural, clear, simple, contemporary English. American and British editions of the complete Bible were published in 1976. I would have been 6 years old. 1978, 2 years later, the New International Version. I like this one the best, and here's why. Under sponsorship of the New York International Bible Society, now called the International Bible Society, a committee on Bible translation that was formed to oversee completely new translation from the best original texts. The committee enlisted the help of Bible scholars from the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and from various denominations in order to avoid any sectarian bias, meaning it isn't just going to be my way because of where I come from. The translation of each book of the Bible was assigned to a team of scholars. Therefore, you couldn't have somebody say, well, I'm going to interpret this whole thing. It's like, nope, you get this book, you get this book, you get this book. Here's the original text. Where are your gifts at translating? And let's see what you get. The translation of each book was assigned to a team of scholars. So it wasn't to one person, a team of scholars. Not people like you and me. Scholars. And several committees that had to also review it. So not just scholars, but committees that were all watching for, carefully checking the accuracy of translation, the clarity, and the literary style of the writer. These translators were united in their commitment to the authority and infallibility of the Bible as God's written word. So these were people who were dedicated to say, hey, we're going to have a whole team of people, not just a scholar, a team of scholars, and all you get is one book. And we want Catholic, oh, I don't know about Catholics. We want Presbyterians, we want Lutherans, we want Baptists, we want whatever. They made sure there was no sectarian bias in the denominations. Now, the reason I said not Catholic, denominations are Protestant, y'all. That's not within the Catholic Church, so that's why I said that. Okay. Then became, in 1982, 4 years later, the new King James Version, which was the King James Version, where 119 Bible scholars worked on this project, which was sponsored by the International Trust for Bible Studies and Thomas Nelson Publishers. They sought to preserve and improve the 1611 version. So now you have people from the the King James 1611 saying, let's look at that again. Let's use what we've got now. The copies we didn't have originally, and let's look at that again. So they signed it to a team who did that. That's the new King James Version. And then there's a new Revised Standard Version. Remember there was the Revised Standard Version in 1952?